Good morning, everyone, and good evening, Professor May. We welcome all to this concluding session of the 4-day international conference on Ecocriticism, Theory and Praxis, organized by the Department of English of Ramakrishna Mission Residential College, Autonomous Narendrapur, as a part of the Diamond Jubilee celebrations of the college. It is a proud privilege for the department to be able to host celebrated scholars of national and international repute on this digital platform. So the conference has been graced by the virtual presence of Professor Swarnalata Rangarajan of IIT Madras, Professor Pramod K. Nair of University of Hyderabad, Professor Xiang Xiangzhen of Shandong University, China, Professor Sharvishta Chatterjee of Ale University, Kolkata, Sri Bidhu Chand Murmu of Ramakrishna Mission Residential College, Narendrapur, and Brigitte Uter-Kornetsky, an eco-filmmaker from Switzerland. Now, in this session, we are proud, privileged, and honored to welcome a very celebrated and internationally acclaimed theater personality and scholar, Professor Theresa J. May of the University of Oregon, USA. This concluding session will eventually be graced by Sri Shankha Ghosh of the Department of English to deliver the valedictory address, and Professor Satyaki Pal of the Department of English, Ramakrishna Mission Residential College, Narendrapur, to deliver the formal vote of thanks. Professor Theresa May indeed needs no introduction. However, to introduce her formally to our audience, Professor May is a director, playwright, and associate professor of theater at the University of Oregon. She is a leading voice in ecological and community-based theater. She is author of Earth Matters on Stage, Ecology, Environment, and American Theater, co-editor of Readings in Performance and Ecology, and co-author of Gridding Up Our Houses, a guide to a more ecologically sound theater, the first book on sustainable theater management. She is the co-founder and executive director of the Earth Matters on Stage, Ecodrama Playwrights Festival and Symposium on Theater and Ecology, and the founding artistic director of Theater in the Wild, a site-specific community-based theater in Seattle. She co-founded Earth Matters on Stage to respond to environmental crises through theater and performing arts, and to quote Professor May, to host plays that enliven and transform our experience of the world around us, that inspire us to listen better and instill a deeper or more complex sense of our ecological communities. Professor May has been extensively lecturing and writing about the contribution of theater to the shaping of popular understandings of the environment in the age of climate change. She has directed theater productions to literate people about ecology and has used the medium of theater as a powerful force for social change. She has been a pioneering figure in combining eco-critical thought and eco-theater practice, what she famously calls eco-dramaturgy. In fact, eco-dramaturgy is a term that Professor May coined and standardized into popular discourse. Professor May's talk today is titled From Eco-Theater to Eco-Dramaturgy, Theater, Climate Change, and Civic Engagement. Ma'am, on behalf of the department and the college, I once again extend a warm welcome to you. It is an absolute honor for us to host you, and I now request you to deliver your lecture. It's over to you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Pranab. Thank you, Professor Mandal. And thank you to your entire college and all of your colleagues for inviting me to the Jubilee Conference to help celebrate with you today at Ramakrishna Residential College. And I say good morning to all of you, even though it is evening here in the United States. I know that it's morning there. And in fact, you know, that reminds me of the way time itself is mutable and fluid. And one of the plays that I want to talk about today uses time in that way. But in that way, in a sense, you are the future. I am speaking to the future from the past, from the darkness of the past. And as you know, we recently had an election here in the United States. And in the acceptance speech of one of the senators, an African-American senator from the state of Georgia, Raphael Warnock, he told a story in his acceptance speech about when he was a little boy, and he would have to get up early in the morning when it was still dark to help his father to prepare for work. And he said, as a little boy, he said, "Why do we have to get up? It's still dark out. It's not even morning." And his father said, "Well, darkness always comes before the dawn. And it is in the darkness that we prepare for the new day." And so this morning, I speak to you who live now in the new day, even though I'm speaking to you from the darkness in which the United States is today encompassed. You represent the morning that is to come. I'm going to share my screen now and hope that this works. And Pranab will tell me if it is working. Okie dokie. Are you seeing that, Pranab?
Not yet, ma'am. Not yet. It's not yet showing.
Not yet. Well, you should be. Gosh. Are you now seeing it?
Not yet, ma'am. Yeah, the share screen, not yet.
All right. I think it is not working. I'm going to go back out. I would hate to have you not be.
Yes.
So we tried this before. So I just click on share screen.
Yeah. Yeah, just on the share screen. Yes.
And then I moved it over so that you could see. Do you see it now?
No. No.
All right. Well, maybe I need, if I move that.
No, not yet.
Oh, goodness. Okay. Well, I don't quite know what else to do. This worked when we did the dry run, right? All right, what are you seeing? Are you still seeing me?
Yeah, I can just see you. I can just see you. Yeah, ma'am, I can see that. I can see that. Yes, it's there.
All right. All I have to do is move this over. Okay, where is that? Let's see. It's got that way. All right. Are you seeing the first slide? Do you see the first slide?
Ma'am, I think you have to just minimize this StreamYard thing, and you can just open the slide. You can just click on the PowerPoint. I think the PowerPoint will it be difficult for you to only show the PowerPoint? Do you have the text?
No, I'm just showing the PowerPoint right now. Are you seeing it?
Yeah, no, I can see your screen, but is it showing any PowerPoint? I can see that. Yeah, ma'am, could you please minimize this StreamYard, this entire screen? Is it possible to minimize the entire screen and just click on the PowerPoint?
I minimized the screen that you and I are on, and
Okay.
now I cannot seem to move. I had moved this.
Could you?
Close it. I'm going to close my PowerPoint and I'm going to reopen it.
Yes, yes. I think that could help.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's all right, ma'am. It's all right.
All right. Are you seeing it now?
Mm.
So it's open and it's at the center of my screen and I don't know what else to do.
I think something is putting this trouble. So is the PowerPoint at the center of your screen, ma'am?
Yes, the PowerPoint is at the center of the screen. I can move it that way, or I can move it.
Yeah. I can actually see your cursor, the mouse, yes, and it's on your. I don't know why it's not working.
The thing we did last time was, oh shit. Excuse me. Oh gosh, I just don't know I don't know what to do. You know, I wonder. So I can make the screen large.
Yes.
Of you
yes.
and I, and then in that. I don't know why there are two.
Yeah, I also can see there are two. Yes. Now, could you please? So, do you have, ma'am, that PowerPoint minimized in the taskbar? Do you have the PowerPoint slide minimized at the taskbar?
I'm reopening it. So now.
Yeah. So, ma'am, probably you have to again share your screen. Yeah, just, ma'am, please reopen this and share your screen after that.
Okay, now I have to go back to this. Okay. I just come to a screen that says StreamYard wants to share the contents of your screen.
Yes.
Like to share.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And so I just did. Is it showing it?
Yeah. Yeah. It's better. It's good. Yeah. We can see this.
Right.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. It's absolutely fine, ma'am. Yes.
So now I don't know how to. Because it took my the thing I tell it to, you know. Oh, there it is. Okay. Holy moly.
Oh, yes. Yeah, this is great. This is
okay. Now you see it, and it's the whole screen.
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. We can also read this every line, every word.
All right.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Yes. Yeah.
Very good. I do apologize. It's the state of our world, right? You know.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
So anyway, thank you for having me, and apologies for that trouble. Before I go into the bulk of my talk today, I just wanted to lay down some theory, some frameworks, and then I'm going to talk about 3 different plays. So I think the first question, especially for viewers at your conference who may not be so familiar with theater or even with eco-theater, we want to, talk a little bit about what it is. And we know what theater is, we know what drama is, but this is a particular kind of drama that really shows the human experience or the implications of man-made climate change or other environmental issues. Can be a play that illuminates environmental injustice, particularly in relation to communities of color. Can be plays that interpret a community to be something more than just people, but to include our whole ecological community. Maybe a play that gives voice to a character that is really the land or animals or elements from the natural world. Could be a play that grows out of a playwright's personal relationship to the land or the cultural significance of a place and the ecology of that place. Or it could be a play that puts indigenous understandings and indigenous ways of knowing, what we call traditional ecological knowledge, at the center of the play. So those are just a few examples. There are more, but I bet you're thinking of stories or plays that you've read that would meet some of these characteristics. So that then expands into a kind of theoretical framework that I've called ecodramaturgy. And it's really just a way of working. It's a way of working as a scholar. It's a way of working as a student or as a director or a playwright. It's what we mean by praxis, that way that we put the theory, our ecological understanding, into practice as we make theater and as we talk about theater and as we write plays and direct them and as we analyze them as scholars, right? So ecodramaturgy has three kind of major threads as a praxis. One is to examine the implicit environmental message of a play or a production and to make that implicit environmental message explicit through analysis and to get at the ecological ideology that is really in that play. Professor Mandal was telling me that some of you have read The Death of a Salesman, and I bet the next time you go back and read it, or if you have it in another class, you will see that in that play, there's a kind of ecology. Willie Loman is planting seeds in the backyard. He lives in a world that doesn't fit, that doesn't work, that isn't nurturing for him anymore. And that's a kind of ecology. So as a scholar, we can look into a play and we can see what its environmental message is. The second main kind of thread of ecodramaturgy as a praxis is to actually use theater as a tool to investigate ecological issues, climate change, or other kinds of contemporary ecological problems. As theater is a way of exploration of our relationship with the natural world. And this gives rise to new plays and different kinds of productions and ways of working with each other to create new art that has an ecological message or an ecological sensibility, really. And then the third, which I'm really not going to talk a lot about today, but it has to do with doing theater in a way that reduces the carbon footprint of doing theater. This is a material art form. We use a lot of stuff. We use wood and styrofoam and all kinds of materials. And so ecodramaturgy is also to ask the question, what if we made theater and we didn't use a lot of new stuff? What if we recycled things? What if we were conscious of what we're putting back into the waste stream of our communities? And so those are the three kind of pieces of ecodramaturgy. And I'm sure you can think of productions you've seen or plays you've read that it might be useful to look at through this lens, because it's really a lens. It's a way of working as a scholar or as a playwright. There will be less words on the page going forward. So these are the three plays that I want to talk about a little bit today. But before I do, I also want to point to that theater is a way of knowing. It's not just a play on a page or a production on a stage. Theater is actually a way to inquire into our experience as human beings. It's a way that we can know things, and we can think of other ways of knowing, like mathematics, for example, which is, there are some things you can only explain with mathematics. If you don't do the math, you cannot understand them, right? You cannot explain them. Language is also a way of knowing. We know things through reading, through being verbal. So theater is a way of knowing, and some of the ways that it inquires, that it knows, is through the body of the performer, the body of the audience are there together in one space. And that is very particular to this art form. Poems and literatures, you don't have to be in the same space as the art makers. So in that way, it's like sculpture or it's like dance. It's embodied, it's immediate, meaning even if it's a play about history or a play from the past, like Macbeth, it's happening right now, and we're together. And so in that way, it's immediate, it has presence. And the third thing about theater as a way of knowing is that it's communal. It's not me alone in my room thinking something, or even making a painting. We come together as a community to make theater, or at least we did before the pandemic, right? And so, in that way, it's an art form that we can't practice right now. And all of us who make theater are very sad about that. And for these reasons, because it's embodied, because it's present, it's immediate, and because it always takes place in community, theater, I think, is a way to exercise our muscles of democracy and make a democratic way of being. It's a way to practice democracy. So let me find I need to turn the page here. So the first play that I'm going to talk about, these three plays, two of them take place in the Arctic of North America. And then one takes place very near where I live in Oregon and Northern California. This is a play called Sila by Chantal Bilodeau, and it's about the impact of climate change. There are three families in it, and it's told in three different languages: English, French, and Inuktitut, which is the language of the Inuit of Baffin Island in Nunavut, which is way northern Canada. And it's a separate nation, a separate country. And this takes place there. Oops. You can see here, this is the Arctic Circle, and one of the challenges of the play, or one of the things that it does, is it gets us out of our mindset of East and West, and instead gives us a whole Arctic perspective. You can see here's Canada, and this is where the play takes place, on this kind of shaped island, which is very near Greenland. And this is the in the Baffin Island in the nation of Nunavut. Sila is also a play. It interweaves the stories of an Inuit family, of climate scientists and Anglophone Canadian government and government officials. And the third family is a family of polar bears. And so in that way, it looks at climate change through the stories of these three different families or three different communities, really. And it's a very culturally specific play in that it makes use of the frameworks of thinking of Inuit people. And so there's a lot of challenges in its production to be, to be true, to do consultation with Inuit people in order to get it right, in a sense. You may be familiar if you've looked at, for example, the logo of the 2010 Winter Olympics. They adapted this Inuit work of art that is called an Inuksuk, or if there's more than one, an Inuksut. And it means, in Inuktitut, it means that which acts in the capacity of a human. And I have it here because I think a play, too, is a kind of Inuksut. It acts in the capacity of a human being. In this particular play, the central characters of a mother and a daughter, Liana is the mother, and she's modeled on climate activist Shilawat Cloutier, who's an Inuit activist who brought a human rights lawsuit against the United States for a violation of human rights by causing climate change. And then her daughter in the play, Veronica, is also modeled on a real person. Tanya Takak, she's a poet and a singer. You can Google her and listen to her. She's absolutely amazing. But the land, and of course the polar bears, the land itself is also kind of a character in the play. The third storyline is, as I said, the family of polar bears, the mother and the daughter. But in production, this becomes a big responsibility to represent non-human characters, right? To avoid the stereotypes that even polar bears have been subject to. And also, of course, to avoid the stereotypes of people and cultures. So both productions that I've seen of this play have worked very hard to avoid those kinds of stereotypes. In this play, Sila, the polar bears are understood through an Inuit cultural framework in which the bear is the kin of human beings, is part of the family, the extended family, the community of human beings. And in fact, the mama bear tells the daughter bear a story that is from a time when human beings and bears, human beings and animals shifted their skins with ease and understood each other's language. So that's very much the framework of the play, that kind of indigenous understanding. It was produced in Boston at the Underground Railway Theater, and you can see here is one way in which they accomplished the theatrical bear. It was a puppet operated by one particular performer. We produced it, I directed it at the University of Oregon in 2015. And we approached it a little bit differently. One of the things that we did was we wanted to make the land a kind of a person. We wanted to show that the land is alive. It's not just ice that's dead. It's alive and moving. And so we had, you can see right here coming out of the ice, a kind of person, a kind of human figure, and here other human figures. So the set would kind of transform as these human figures moved pieces around. We chose this particular sculpture, which is by an Inuit artist it's called Spirit Bear, and it's about the interdependence of human beings and the animals and the bear. And you can also see here the Canadian goose. You can see the salmon back here, and you can see various peoples here, all woven together out of one piece of stone. And so this became what in the theater we call a central metaphor for the production. And these were the values, the ecological values. So going back to ecodramaturgy as a praxis, we ahead of time decided these are the values that we find in the play and that we want our production to communicate. The values of interconnection, that time and place and language and culture and animals and humans are all interdependent and overlapping, and that they all have spheres of knowledge. That those fluid, malleable, shape-shifting, transparent beings are permeable, that bears and people can shift back and forth, that people and land can shift back and forth, and that one of the pieces of our ecology that we wanted to put out in the front in this production was that as human beings, we are permeable. We are permeable with the environment around us. And certainly the Inuit people have that interdependence with the land, and they understand the land as part of them and themselves and their families and communities as part of the land. And so then the last value, which is an ecological value, is this value of kinship. Family, ancestors, not just blood relations, but all of the community, the animals, and that sense of kinship goes forward and back in time, as well as across species. So the land then became a kind of living character as it transformed throughout the play. The problem of staging the bears was always a question of, again, avoiding those stereotypes, not letting the audience think, oh, isn't that cute? That's a polar bear cub. Not letting the audience get away with making the bear an object. Instead, we wanted the bear to be a kind of living being, a kind of process, a kind of kin, really. And so we went back to this and we said, hey, this bear is a village. And in fact, one polar bear can feed and clothe many, many people. So we wanted our bear to be a village. And so instead of a single puppet, we had a number of actors. We had still had one puppet as the kind of front, but we had actors that moved and transformed as the bear would move across the stage. There is a moment when the mother bear speaks to her cub. She says, all life is breath, from the original and eternal breath from which creation is drawn to the world. Sila wraps itself around us. Sila holds the stars above our head. It carries the clouds across the land. It ripples the ocean waves, and it moves in and out of our lungs. See, that's Sila. And with each breath, Sila reminds us that we are never alone. each one of us, from the lichen on the tundra to the beluga whale in the ocean, the snow goose in the sky, every living creature is connected. Sila reminds us that we are never alone. So each time the mother bear spoke and each time she moved, this whole village of people moved with her as if they're part of her body. And this establishes the play's underlying Inuit cosmology, that time when strange powers were shared among people and the land and the creatures, and they all spoke the same tongue and they traded skins with ease. And so in that way, the play accomplishes this ecological and ecodramaturgical task of refusing to make the bear an object, refusing to make the Inuit people an object, and instead presents them as part of a fabric of a place, a fabric of community. One of the other characters in the play is this character of Tulaguk, who is the Inuit Elder, and he counsels here a French-Canadian Quebecois climate scientist who fell through the ice because he was being stupid and did not know how to listen to the ice, as Tulaguk does. And he tells this scientist, we need stories. We need stories, not just science, not just numbers. And in this way, the play is reaffirming that Indigenous knowledge, Indigenous traditional ecological knowledge is often contained in stories. The character of the mother, Liana, which is modeled on Shilawat Cloutier, in the play, she gives several, in a sense, speeches, as if she's speaking to the Circumpolar Commission at the United Nations, as if she's making her case for the human rights violation of the United States. And I wanted to just read one piece of what she says, and this is very close, in fact, to what Shilawat Cloutier said to the United Nations Commission. I come from a place of rugged mountains, imperial glaciers, and tundra-covered permafrost. I come from a place where north is where you stand and south is everywhere else. I come from a place where you can walk into the ocean and, if you're lucky, beyond the horizon itself. I come from a people who have kept accounts of the early days when the world was rich and urgent and new, when spirits roamed the land like polar bears and musk oxen and caribou. This place that I come from, we call Nunavut. It means our land in Inuktitut. It is where we, Inuit, have thrived for more than 4,000 years. It is where we realize our full potential. It is where we nurture our knowledge of who we are. But Nunavut, our land, is only as rich as it is cold, and today, most of it is melting. So in that speech, Liana describes the land as this foundation of Inuit identity. And she shares with us Shilawat Cloutier's argument that the willful destruction of a place like this destroys culture and constitutes a violation of Indigenous sovereignty and of human rights. In this play, then, these three families, the family of Veronica and her mother, the family of the polar bears, and the family of the climate scientists and the government officials, just kind of come crashing together, and the personal and the political, the community concerns and the global concerns all come crashing together when Veronica's son is found dead by inhaling gasoline, which was something that was done by young people. And so this reiterates the argument that climate change is not just about the loss of ice or even the loss of polar bears. It's about the loss of culture. It's about the loss of families. It's about the loss of young people. Monique Mojica is a native playwright, North American First Nations playwright, and she talks about the way in which these kinds of experiences, experiences of loss, experiences of culture being impacted by climate change, by settler colonialism, which in a sense, when you think about the impact of the United States and our carbon footprint on the Arctic, colonialism and climate change become one and the same thing. She says, our bodies are our books, our bodies are our libraries, fully referenced in memory and endless resource, a giant database of stories. This is blood memory. This is where my work comes from. In the next play that I want to tell you about, we really see this story of the blood memory of a First Nations playwright coming into the play, finding expression in her work as a dramatist. The second play here is Burning Vision by Marie Clements. And Marie Clements is a Métis playwright, First Nations Métis playwright from British Columbia, Canada. And her play is very much from her own experience and the experience of her family in particular, as she traces some of her family history back across the continent. Diane Glancy is another native playwright, Cherokee playwright. And I love this quote of hers. It really describes the essence of Burning Vision. A play connects us to a power source, a new oral tradition with breath, which is the condition of performance, voices speaking outward from the core of experiences, voices in a larger story. And in this particular play, indeed, those voices echo outward from a very powerful event, which was the making of the atomic bomb. And you wouldn't think this is a play about climate change, and yes, it is, because many scientists now believe that this, what we call the great acceleration of climate change, started to happen right about the time that the atomic bomb was invented and deployed by the United States. So this play takes place also in Canada, in northern Canada and the Northern Territories, at a place called Great Bear Lake. This is Port Radium, which is where much of the uranium that was mined, much of the black rock that gives us both uranium and plutonium was mined. And Marie traces her own family's roots and her own family's heritage and history back to Great Bear Lake and what she calls the running of uranium, the mining, the shipping, the transport of uranium from Great Bear Lake, from Port Radium, all the way down the Mackenzie River, down into Ontario where it's processed, and then ultimately to the Manhattan Project in Arizona in the southern United States. So she's really tracking in this play, which is about the history of the making of the bomb, but from an Indigenous point of view, from the point of view of the Dene communities in the Northern Territories that mined it, and they didn't know they were mining something that was radioactive. And the experiences of the Japanese in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, on whom the weapon was deployed. And in that way, she's doing a very eco-dramaturgical thing in that she's tracing the material relationships that are born out of our use of material resources. The play starts with also the sense of that this rock, this black rock, is living. It's not an inert object. It's living. It's a little boy that is discovered, and then he runs through the play, and he's trying to make his way home. The tribal concept of time, that is timelessness, in which both time and space are multidimensional. This is the way this play, Burning Vision, conceives of time. Time does not pass during the play. There's no sort of beginning, middle, end. It's all the middle. It starts with the sound of the detonation of the bomb, and then it cycles through what might have been the impact of that on the Dene lives that were employed to mine it, on their culture, on the caribou. What might have been the impact of that on the lives of people in Japan? And this, Polygon Allen, who's a Laguna Pueblo poet, says is a particularly indigenous perspective, but it's interestingly consistent with the theories of relativity in contemporary physics. The very self is conceived as a moving event within a moving universe. So this play is nonlinear, it's circular in its storytelling. It weaves many, many lives, about 15 different characters across time and space. One of the things that we did when we produced it at my university is we staged it in the round so that that circular time was always present on stage in a kind of physical way. Two of the characters in the play are the widow of a Dene miner, a Dene ore carrier, and a young Métis woman named Rose, who makes bread throughout the whole play. The widow is constantly mourning the loss of her young husband, who was an ore carrier. He comes back and forth as his ghost, and she speaks to him, and she refuses to let his memory die. She refuses even to throw his boots in the fire. She refuses to let go of the coat that she made from him out of caribou skin. And this refusal is interesting because, in a sense, she is refusing to let the Canadian government forget the Dene people who were impacted by the mining of uranium way back in the 1940s. Those people never had reparations for their ill health. They had extraordinary incidences of cancer. And it wasn't until 1997 that the government formally recognized the oral traditions of the Dene people as history, and their experience of ill health and cancer and the impact of the uranium mining on their land and on their ways of life. So in that way, the play becomes a real assertion of indigenous memory and indigenous oral tradition. In fact, there is a legend, a Dene legend, that tells about the atomic bomb. The legend was told by a medicine man way back in the 19th century. And then it comes true many generations later. In that way, the play uses that legend and many others as a way of reinforcing the idea that the Canadian government and the Canadian Supreme Court had just recognized, which is that Indigenous oral tradition is history and should be recognized as such. So now in the Canadian Supreme Courts, it is, not so much in the United States Supreme Courts. And this is a play really that uses that Dene oral history to transform these isolated experiences. The woman in Japan, the factory worker who's making the bomb, the test dummy in Arizona who's part of the testing of the atomic bomb, the widow of the ore carrier. All of these individual lives then become overlapping and intersected, and we start to see the connections that have been invisible or made invisible by the way history has been told. There is a Dene elder, a seer, they're called in the play, a voice that says maybe we are all talking at the same time because we are answering each other over time and space. And so in that way, the play has a very, it's a very quantum physics sense, but it's also a very profound indigenous sense, as Polygon Allen expressed, of this what's called ceremonial time, when time and space are permeable and fluid. The next play that I want to talk about really speaks to this. Leanne Howe, Choctaw playwright and teacher, professor, talks about, as we saw in the last play, that Native stories are power. They create people, she said. And indeed, in Burning Vision that we just saw, they created the person of the Black Rock. They created the person of the community. They created the person of the polar bears. So in a sense, there is a way in which Native stories give rise to new ways of being, new sense of what it means to be a human being. They author tribes, she says. She calls it a rhetorical space of tribalography. And this is the last play I want to talk about. Professor Mandal, if I'm running over time, please let me know. But this is a play called Salmon Is Everything. This does not take place in the Arctic. It takes place here in Oregon and Northern California. This is a play that I wrote in collaboration with a number of regional indigenous tribes here in our area, called Salmon Is Everything. This is, if you can probably recognize this shape as the shape of California. This is the west coast of the United States. Here in this little square is the watershed of the Klamath River, and it's a great big river, one of the many large rivers of the Pacific Northwest, both in the United States and Canada, one of the great big rivers, and it's a salmon running river. Salmon is a large andromatous fish that comes to the ocean, is born up in the highlands or the mountains, and then migrates down, lives in the ocean for a number of years, and then comes back up the river to spawn, comes back up the river to lay its eggs and mate and lay its eggs. Most of the rivers, many of the rivers in the western United States have dams on them, and so the salmon can't get back up those rivers. But this is one of the few rivers where the salmon can go at least as far as the Oregon border, but not much further, because the whole upper part of the river is now used for farming, and they did build dams up there in order for the farmers to have water. This is what the mouth of the river looks like. The salmon are out here in the ocean, and then they swim all the way up the river. The river's headwaters are near Crater Lake, which is one of our national parks, and then the river runs from Oregon into California and out into the Pacific Ocean. Along this river, there are a great many indigenous tribes that still depend on the river for their sustenance, for their livelihood, and for their cultural traditions. Among them, the Klamath Modoc tribe, the Karuk tribe, the Yurok tribe, and the Hoopa Valley tribe. This is a friend of mine whose name is Ron Reed. He's a member of the Karuk tribe, and he's using a traditional dip net. He's a fish biologist and elder in the tribe, and he's using a dip net there. They actually fish salmon out of rapids like this. In the very upper part of the Klamath River, settler colonialism has brought agriculture, has brought cattle, and for the Klamath Modoc who live in that upper Klamath region, the impact of settler colonialism has taken more and more and more of their land and has robbed them of many of the fish and other elements that they depend on. So it's a river that is conflicted. In 2002, when I was teaching at a college that was very near the mouth of the river, about 80,000 fish died in one particular week, 2-week period. And this often, there are dead fish along a river. This was an inordinate amount, thousands upon thousands of fish. And fish biologists, both native and non-native, working for the US government, as well as the tribes, realized that the fish had died because the water was too low. Too much water had been kept upriver for the farms and the ranches during a year of drought, and not enough had been brought downstream. So the salmon were swimming in warm water and they got a disease and many of them perished. It was a tragedy for the tribes, especially the Karuk tribe and the Yurok tribe, who depend upon those salmon. So when this happened, I started working with some students, Native students and Native faculty at Humboldt State University, and we created a play about this catastrophe and also about the Native history that went into it and caused the history that caused the fish kill to happen. And then the activism that Native people participated in to change the situation, to work to let their voices be heard. The national media was covering the plight of the farmers in the drought, but they didn't cover the fish kill adequately. And so we thought that theater could intervene. Theater could be a place where the story of why this happened could be told. And so I collaborated with people from all those tribes, as well as members of the community. And we created a play that spoke to these issues, that celebrated Native identity, Yurok, Karuk, lifeways and the waterways, and that asserted Native sovereignty on the river. And also that voiced the side of the farmers and what they needed. And ultimately, the play became a conversation and actually a site of conversation between the farmers and the ranchers and the Native people who lived along the river. In doing a piece like this, as with Sila or with Burning Vision, attention in producing it is always to making sure that Native actors are in the Native roles, that there's consultation with the tribal communities about how they want to be represented, and then a sense of giving the work, giving the play, giving the production back to the community. And going back to what I said earlier about theater as a way of knowing, this was such a good example of that we come into the theater and we have this, maybe you've heard this phrase, the magic what if, or the willing suspension of disbelief. And this particular convention of the art of theater allows for a very open way of listening, a unique kind of listening. And so people who otherwise maybe in the street or in the political situations or in the media would not want to listen to each other, they end up listening to each other in the theater. And so this play also allowed that to happen by giving voice to both the anger and the upset and the impact of the fish kill on the native people, on the indigenous tribes of the river, but also giving voice to some of the ranchers and the farmers as they were struggling with what to do and how to be good neighbors. This play is, in a sense, the others are as well, but this one more particularly example of community-based eco-theater, which is a particular kind of eco-theater in which the community is actively involved in the making of the play, in the production of the play. And in a sense, when the play's finished, it's their story. They own the story. They've been part of the creative process. And so it's important just to make that distinction, that it's not so much a play that is written by one person that then has a copyright. It's a play that belongs to the community that helped write it. That, I think, is the end of my lecture. I'm sure I'm out of time here. But I wanted to close with this beautiful quote. I hope that you'll read these three plays or see them at some point. But I wanted to close with this beautiful quote by Monique Mojica, because all of these stories were about injury, right? About something that happened, climate change and its impact on the Inuit, the mining of uranium and its impact on the Dene over a long period of time, the fish kill and its impact on the native communities of the Klamath River. And we would think, well, these are plays about catastrophe, and they are. Plays about injury, and they are. Plays about pain and community pain, and they are. But they are also something more than that. And in Monique Mojica's quote here, we see what that more is. And that's because of the very nature of theater. In the theater, we are performing possible worlds into being. By embodying that wholeness on stage, we can transform the stories that we tell ourselves and project into the world that which is not broken, that which can be sustained, not only for Aboriginal people, but for all people of this small green planet. That, to me, is the power of theater. We can tell the stories, but if we tell them together and we tell them there in the space where we are together as communities, we're telling the story of the injury, but we're embodying wholeness. We're embodying a world that's not broken, because here we are sitting together having this conversation. So that is what I'd like to leave you with. And with that, I thank you for the honor of being here today. And I apologize again for the technical difficulty. I hope there's some way of cutting that out of the recording of this, but if not, these are the two books I'd love to share with you. And I'd be happy to share this PowerPoint also with Professor Mandal. I will stop sharing now.
Yeah. So you ended with a dhanyabad. Dhanyabad, yes. That's the Indian way of saying thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Professor May. Am I audible to you, ma'am?
Yes, you are. And I just need to close my PowerPoint here.
Yeah, it's closed on our end, yes.
Okay.
So thank you. Okay. Thank you so much, Professor May, for enlightening us about the discourse of eco-theater or eco-dramaturgy. You have really taught us how theater as a tool may be used to voice about the environmental concerns and how it can promote social change. You have also made us aware of the challenges of doing eco theater. Thank you. Theatrically, it was highly motivating for us, as you have shown how to accommodate non-human characters on the stage, going beyond their aesthetic responses, how these non-human characters may be presented as subjects rather than objects on the stage. And the photographs of the performances really give us excitements. How intense these performances have been, I'm sure. Especially, you have seen we have seen how you have represented natural resources on the stage through props and characters. Yeah, that is highly motivating, highly encouraging. So thank you very much, Professor May. So I would
Thank
like to
you.
take some of the questions from our students. There are already quite a few of questions they have already asked. Before I go into their questions, before I start taking their questions, I would like to make two questions to you before I take my students' questions. So first of all, I have seen that the play, the theater productions you have discussed are mostly set up in a proscenium structure, and I think you have also performed in site-specific theater mode as well. So
Mhm.
I was just wondering, how do you compare these two theater forms, so far as this so far as conveying the ecological concerns to the audiences more effectively, so far as this effective telling of the concerns, effective yes. Uh, which one is more effective, do you think, or maybe how is the response of these two forms in terms of effectiveness?
That's a really good question, and you're right in that it was by doing site-specific theater that drew me into the eco-dramaturgy.
Yeah,
I think the opportunities of site-specific theater are great, right? We could perform the play Salmon Is Everything. What if we performed it right on the river? That would be a whole different thing. That would be very much the river would come alive. The river would be part of the story. And that, I think, the visceral presence of the natural world is a really important piece of site-specific theater. That said, there's a lot of ways in which site-specific theater, you have to allow for other aspects of it, an airplane flying overhead and that kind of thing. So you have to choose the site very carefully. I actually teach a class in site-specific theater, and not all site-specific theater is eco-drama. I mean, it lends itself to that because I am in the environment, but it's not always an explicit message. But in this class, one of the questions that we ask is, how does the space that we're in, whether it's outdoors or indoors, it's still a space that's not a theater. What does it tell us? What does it want us to do? There are certain spaces that actually control our bodies. I walk into a big classroom, a big lecture hall, and the space is telling me to sit down and be quiet. And it's putting power in a certain, up there at the lectern. So all spaces inform our way we can relate to people, the way we think of ourselves. So really you get into, in doing site-specific theater, you get into thinking about, the theories of architecture and landscape architecture and what it means to not be able to see all of it at one time, to be able to have a conversation with your person you came with, or some strangers walking next to you, versus always looking at the performance. So there's a lot of additional factors that you have to consider in producing it. And what if it rains? So there's a lot of questions, some of them very practical, but some of them also artistic and theoretical to answer. But of course, it lends itself enormously to eco-critical ideas and ecological values.
Yeah, so it has its own challenges. Yeah.
Yeah, it sure does, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Ma'am, the second question is, I have always been interested in the discourse of audience reception. And since these plays, these eco theaters are primarily produced in order to generate some kind of social awareness about climate change and etc. So how do you, and since you have been a practitioner for such a long time, you have been closely active with this theater productions. So do you, ma'am, do you see changes, or how does the audience respond or react to these theater productions? Do you see changes or any impact regarding this, activities or actions? How do the audience respond to these theater productions?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. I think your question underscores the importance of dramaturgy and the importance of not just producing the play, but actually providing the audience with context, with other materials, with something more that they can read or see, and to have maybe some discussions afterwards that allow the audience to share their feelings or ask questions, not just of the actors, but maybe having experts or government officials, members of the tribal community. Every time we did Salmon Is Everything, we had members of the tribe come. They answered questions afterwards. We had a whole exhibit in the lobby. I think in all those plays we did that so that you don't just go to the theater and then shut the door and go home. You actually give people more information that they can take with them, because once they've heard the story, their hearts are opened, right? And they want more. And so that's really the time that they can learn more and then sometimes do more. It's a question. It's always a question about, does theater actually make a difference? And I don't have the answer to that question. The world is large. The impacts of everything that we do, any individual or any group of people, is small. But I think it does matter. I think it matters the stories that we tell. I know that in the case of Salmon Is Everything, it has mattered because that play has been retold and retold and retold. And now they're taking the dams down on the river. They're taking 4 dams on that river that will allow the salmon to come further back, further home upstream. So incrementally, and I think change happens. Certainly there's a lot more awareness of climate change now than there was even when I produced Sila a few years ago. So,
yeah, that is really very assuring that, yes, it can convey, it can finally convey something to the audiences. Yes, so ma'am, I'd just like to take questions now from our students. So, yes. Can you read this question, ma'am? Yeah, it's on your screen.
Oh yeah, we are now seeing ecological issues being raised gradually, even in mainstream media like films, even in comic books. Yes. How does this trend, hoping it grows stronger, influence eco-theater? I think it just makes it more pertinent. You know, when I first started doing eco-theater, 25 years ago, it was very what we in the United States would call fringe. But now it's very mainstream. It's very in the public awareness. So I think there are many collaborations to be done with filmmakers, with comic book writers. I think there's wonderful collaborations. So does that answer your question? I think it just makes everything grow stronger. And we always need, nothing ever changes just from one input, from one thing that you hear. You need to hear it multiple times through multiple different venues. I think theater makes a really important difference because it's live, because it goes back to that being together, coming together in community to tell stories that are important to us. And so I think that it has a special place there.
Thank you, ma'am. So the next question is here on the screen.
How can we influence others about the importance of taking care of the environment where we cherish everything Mother Nature offers to us through this true eco-drama and eco-theater? Write more plays. Write plays and produce them. Tell stories. That's what I would say. I think if you are someone who enjoys the theater or goes to the theater or reads plays even, you can see that it's a different kind of information. It's not information that goes into your head. It's information that comes into your heart. And that's a very important kind of information. And I think there's not enough of it. So I would say, yes, make theater, write plays.
Yes, so one last question, ma'am. This is not very directly maybe related to theater, but yes, from how can you respond to this from theatrical perspective?
This is a fantastic question. Yes. One of the reasons why I ended with the quote that I did is because we need to remember that the very act of telling the story, the very act of producing the play is an act of hope and life affirming. Every one of these plays, although I didn't tell you the ending of every one of them, ends not with catastrophe and the kind of people have felt pain and injury and impact, but it ends with hope. In Marie Clement's play, the very last moment is the widow and a child that the character of Rose has, a child named Koji. And she says, I am your new grandmother. You are my new man. You are my new little son, tough like hope. And in that way, even though the play is about the making of the atomic bomb, something that's probably the most horrific image in our Western history of the 20th century, the playwright, as an Indigenous person, refuses the catastrophe and insists on hope, on going forward. And the reason that Native plays, that this is characteristic of Native plays, is because Indigenous people in North America have already lived through catastrophe. They've already lived through the apocalypse. And so they are already evidence that there is more to come. There's work to do going forward. So I think this is a really important. I run this, Ecodrama Playwrights Festival, and it asks for new plays. Most of the plays that are sent are these dystopian kinds of plays that you're referring to here that are about the apocalyptic moment. And I think that's a particularly privileged Western vision of the future. Indigenous people who have lived through catastrophe know that imagining the end is not the work that needs to be done. We need to imagine what one philosopher calls the living through and living beyond, and that, hope and understanding that we're all connected, that we're all related, is a really important way of resisting that apocalyptic vision that so many Western imaginations seem to be preoccupied with. So it's a great question.
Yes. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much. It was wonderful for me personally to listening to you, to be able to host you. And also it was a great privilege for the department. Ma'am, before I formally leave, because I'm not leaving, but yes, I'm inviting two of my colleagues, because I'm inviting Sri Shankha Ghosh of the Department of English, and also Professor Shattoki Pal of the Department of English of Ramakrishna Mission Residential College. So Sri Shankha Ghosh will be delivering the valedictory address, which will be followed by the formal vote of thanks by Professor Shattoki Pal of our department. Okay. Shankha, may I now please
Right.
request you? Yeah.
Right. Yes. Hello, everyone. Yes. Am I audible?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you are.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I'd like to begin by saying that I believe that we're being somewhat unconventional at this point, because uh, valedictory lecture is generally delivered by either someone who happens to be an expert on the subject, or a senior professor who suggests new entry points into the topic of the conference, keeping in view the trajectory of discussions which had taken place as part of the conference. Now, I do not consider myself competent enough to generate new entry points into the subject. So instead, I'll just try to take stock of the eclectic mix of lectures which have both fascinated and moved us on the past few days. And before I go into that, I'd like to acknowledge that this onus of delivering the valedictory lecture has come upon me because of the fact that from the very beginning, my colleague Sri Pranab Mondal, who also happens to be the convener of this conference, has been both kind and persuasive to involve me in giving the seminar its present shape. Right. So we began with a keynote address by Professor Sarnalata Rangarajan of IIT Madras, and uh, and she, as a keynote speaker often does, she addressed a broad range of issues. As she began with qualifying the term nature, and she also, and then she moved on to the scope and the function of ecocriticism as an engagement, or as a theoretical interventionist position as well. Now, she began with this acknowledgement that nature uh, has been a much abused term, because the stakeholders of ecocriticism often says at contemporary ecocritical approaches often posit that nature has been reduced to a mere linguistic construct. And what Professor Rangarajan tried to do, she said she tried to locate or she zeroed in on the way nature should be understood as an as both uh, as both as an entity which is both structured by meaning as well as something which is informed by its physical causality, which has both it has an inner poetic aspect as well as a physical, an outer physical aspect. And she also uh, glossed upon the function of eco-criticism. And eco-criticism, she said that eco-criticism in its elementary scope tries to locate the embeddedness of self in the context of lived experience. She effortlessly moved through texts ranging from Zen Buddhism to uh, to a contemporary novel like that of Maria Joseph, and she elucidated, as I said, that she elucidated the scope and the function of eco-criticism in a cogent yet uh, no less complex manner. And in the following session, uh, mm, uh, we hosted Professor Pramod K. Nair of University of Hyderabad, who talked about the interrelationship between between the vulnerability that the ecological vulnerability that uh, has been orchestrated by us, by human beings, and the vulnerability in our lives that is informed by that ecological vulnerability, or that is in a way an offshoot of that ecological vulnerability, which he terms the precarious nature, or the eco-precarity or precarious nature of our lives. And he zeroed in on this point that all say all toxicity, or this precarity of our lives is anchored to the fact that all toxicity is biocultural. And he also mentioned on another occasion, he said that this precarious this precarity that informs our lives is context specific, and and we cannot really uh, blame blame other blame people other than ourselves for that. So we cannot put this on say a culture on the say as because he said that our corruption is homegrown. We cannot put that on a different culture for that, and for our for the vulnerability or for the corruption that we have generated. And I'm afraid that I couldn't, or rather, most of us couldn't follow Professor Nair's lecture in its entirety, because the lecture was interrupted by some severe technical glitches. And I believe that this, just a second. Hello. Okay. Oh, sorry, it was my convener was saying that I should wrap up now. Okay, so I believe that this happens that it very often. So technical glitches. Now, moving on, and then we also witnessed discussions on ecological aesthetics, and how your Professor Jing from Shandong University, China, talked about how ecological philosophy has opened up a new subfield of aesthetics, and he talked about the interrelationship, or the exchange between Chinese aesthetics, Chinese eco aesthetics, and American eco aesthetics. And we also encountered Professor Shormishta Chatterjee Srivastav, who talked about the culture specificity of ecofeminism, and my colleague Sri Bedu Mobu talked about the rise of post-colonial ecocriticism as or how as a subfield of post-colonialism, and he talked about how how the colonial legacy is as much a tale of ecological exploitation as it is of a tale of material exploitation. Right. And Professor Teresa May today talked about, and before we go into what Professor May talked about, we also hosted Bridget Kornetsky, who talked about ecological issues not through the mediation of literature. Rather, he directly posed certain unsettling questions to us from the perspective of a conservationist. And she said that, or rather, she brought our attention to the kind of torment or the extent of torment that living creatures, say beginning from or as diverse as your earthworms or elephants, have received the kind of torments they have been subjected to in our hands. And we coming to Professor Teresa May. She talked about the scope of eco dramaturgy, and she says that theater happens as an artistic medium, happens to be, say, or it can accommodate the scope of asking environmental, of staging environmental problems, as well as asking questions relating to ecology, because of its democratic nature, because of the way it can accommodate embodied experience, and the kind of immediacy through which it operates. And I'd just like to see something in this context, that in theater criticism we often talk about the way the audience is relegated into passivity, because they often have a voyeuristic kind of presence within the proscenium. Now, what Professor May's insight tells us, Professor May's insight provides us an alternative entry point into that. She says that theater is capable of introducing a unique listening experience. And I believe that what she meant is that unique listening experience is capable of inaugurating a process of unlearning, and a process of unlearning which is I believe anchored to the cause of addressing ecological crisis, or coming to terms with ecological crisis. And I'd on a concluding note, I'd just say thank the speakers for being their usual incisive selves. And I remember that while we were drafting the invitation letters that would be sent to the speakers, I rather requested my colleague Sri Mondol that he should add a line to that letter, saying that how a literature department like ours remains committed to the cause of making texts accountable to the forces of history as well as society. This and I believe this all the speakers, by being the most as I said, perceptive and in a perceptive and sensitive manner, they have contributed in fulfilling this commitment, and I can only thank them for that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Shankho. Thank you so much. May I now request my teacher, our senior teacher at the department, Professor Shatto Kipal, to deliver the formal vote of thanks. Yes, sir. Over to
Thank you, Pranav. And My good wishes to Professor Theresa May. It's a real privilege for me to say the vote of thanks on behalf of the college and on behalf of the department in connection with this 4-day international online conference organized by this department. After what Shanko has said, a beautiful resume of what had taken place in these last 4 sessions on 4 different days, what is left to me is a roll call of names, as I say thank you to all of you. In a way, Shanko, it's a matter of sheer coincidence, Shanko, that in this conference, online conference on ecology, I think both of us are wearing green. Only my green has slightly faded because I'm an old man and it has taken its toll on the color of my green. But we are both of us coincidentally wearing green. Yes, once again, back to this Thanksgiving. It is not a mere roll call of names. We are deeply touched by the response that we have got from different corners of the world, from the West, the USA and Europe, from the East, China, and also from our own country. In fact, our country is itself a kind of a continent. We are speakers from the South, and of course, we are speakers from our own city of Kolkata. Pranav, Professor May, both Shanko and Pranav were my students at the department, at the undergraduate level. And they have brought together the world at the doorstep of our college. They've turned our department into really what we may call global. Once again, on behalf of the college, on behalf of the department, on behalf of my dear Pranav, I extend my thanks to Professor Shonulata Rangarajan, Professor Pramod Nair, Professor Cheng Jiang Zhan, Professor Shomishta Chatterjee, and then the filmmaker Bridget Kornetsky, our own student, our own colleagues, Bidu Chand Murmu, and of course, Professor Theresa May, who is present with us. I think that it is a fitting finale to this 4-day international conference that we end the entire program with a talk on eco-theater. Nothing can be more immediate. Nothing can connect with people better than the platform of theater. It is living literature. And as students of literature, we feel that theater is the best medium to connect with the people. And it is with theater that we can go to the remotest corners of our country, especially the rural areas, and connect with the rural people who possibly much more than what we are doing in the cities, working much more to preserve the ecological balance. Thank you, Professor Theresa May. And it's a delight to announce, and this is a special information for the students, that Professor May has very kindly decided to award a cash prize of rupees 1,000 in inviting the students to write an essay on ecocriticism. She says that the best essay by the best student should be awarded a cash prize of rupees 1,000, so that it will really generate a keen interest among the students, make them aware of the need to respond to the threat that our civilization is creating to the ecosystem. Professor May, words are not enough to say thank you to you. It will be a great, this seminar itself has created a lot of interest, generated a lot of interest among the students. In these last 4 days, we have got a whole lot of questions on this subject. I never knew that our students were so much aware and they are so much interested in this subject. In fact, I'm part of the department, but I thank my organizer, convener, coordinator, Pranav, for tapping this particular area of literature, which possibly in all these years have gone untapped in our department. And the seminar itself, the webinar, the conference, the talks, and especially this cash award, this prize will really create will really go a long way in not only generating interest, but maybe they will be interested in writing papers, doing researches, not just for journals, maybe for the MPhil degrees or PhD degrees at a later stage of their life. So thank you, Professor May, once again. This is an online conference. Possibly because this is an online conference, we have been able to bring all of you together under this one umbrella. But, well, we live in dreams. I cherish that sometime, someday in the future, we will have you physically in our department, addressing us and addressing our students. Once again, for all those who are here, my heartfelt thanks to all of you. And of course, my thanks also to the support staff of our college who have helped us in organizing this seminar almost glitch-free, without any hassle or trouble. Thank you to all of you.
Thank you, sir. With this,
Rono, will you please take over?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, sir. You have been really kind and motivating. It's your blessing that we're being able to do these things in the department. It's this kind of motivation we have actually got from you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir. And thank you so much, Professor May, for being so kind and so motivating for us. After what sir said, I have really nothing to add to this. We just would like to conclude here, and we wish all of you very, very best. And we surely would like to collaborate more with you. We'd like to hear more from you in future in the department.
That would be very wonderful. Have a wonderful day, and thank you so much for having me. And I will just say I'll see you later.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, bye.
Bye.